we can use that knowledge for obesity prevention and treatment. So we have traditionally approached obesity through calories, exercise, behavior change, and we know genetics, hormones, environment has an impact. But what if there's another important driver, the trillions of gut microbes? When I say gut microbiome or the gut microbes, what I really mean is the trillions of bacteria that live inside our gastrointestinal tract. And the microbiome includes all the microbial genetic material, all the structural proteins, and the environment that they create by all their metabolites. And it is now known very well that this microbiome functions like a metabolic organ because it regulates immunity, metabolism, and hormones in many different ways. There was an interesting experiment done in mice to determine if the gut microbiome could contribute to obesity. And what they did was they used the fecal matter from these mice. And basically, the fecal matter is the best marker of the gut microbiome. And fecal matter was obtained from lean mice and the obese mice. And these were transplanted into genetically normal, germ-free mice. They were given the same food and monitored for a few weeks. And after that, it was very interesting to see that the mice who obtained fecal transplant from obese mice gained much more weight on the same food as compared to the mice who received fecal transplant from lean mice. This suggested that the microbiota of obese mice shows an increased capacity for energy harvest. Well, that is mice. So what about in humans? So the same experiment was attempted in humans, but the challenge in humans is that there's an already established microbiome based on their diet, genetics, age, lifestyle, and environment. So any microbiome that is transplanted has to compete with the established microbiome, and this results in either a partial engraftment of the transplanted microbiome, or the host immune system might completely reject it. Or a third possibility is that over the next few months, it will gradually decline because the diet and the environment may not support the transplanted microbiome. However, what is notable is the microbiome, even in humans, does affect the energy extraction from various food. Another valuable project was the American Gut Project, where more than 20,000 people voluntarily submitted stool samples and filled detailed survey about diet, lifestyle, medications, and health. The scientists looked at this data and found correlation to see what really correlated with a healthy microbiome. And the most influential things that were noted are the ones that you see on the extreme left, were the type of plants and the age of the patient. Other factors like inflammatory bowel disease, antibiotics, BMI, sleep had an impact, but the biggest factor was the type and variety of plants. Further digging into it, they categorized people based on how many varieties of plant that they were eating, and found that people who had more than 30 different varieties of plants per week had the most healthiest microbiome, because each plant provides different fibers and polyphenols supporting different microbial species. This creates a more resilient and metabolically favorable ecosystem. So what happens when we eat? So let's start with eating some. When someone eats simple sugars, those sugars go into our small intestine, and this is rapidly absorbed, and the sugar gets into the circulation. On the other hand, when someone eats whole grains, vegetables, their structure is much more complex. So this cannot be degraded in the small intestine because the human genome only has 17 genes to degrade carbohydrates. and it is unable to degrade it in the small intestine. So then it makes its way into the colon where the microbiota lives, and the microbiome has 60,000 to 100,000 genes to degrade fiber. So this entire complex food structure gets digested in the colon by the microbiome to produce metabolic metabolites, such as short-chain fatty acids and secondary bile acids. These metabolites then stimulate the production of hormones like GLP-1 and PYY, which help reduce the appetite. Also, the fiber forms a gel, which helps to delay or block the absorption of simple carbohydrates in our diet. For example, if someone were to drink juice by itself, it would get rapidly absorbed and cause a sugar spike. But if they ate salad and vegetables first, the fiber would form that gel and would slow down the absorption of glucose, and glycemic load would be reduced. So let's say there's no fiber in the diet. What happens in that situation? So no fiber means the glucose is being absorbed in the small intestine. Nothing is making its way to the colon, and the microbiome is basically dying, and no or reduced amount of microbial metabolites are made, and this results in low GLP-1 and increase in appetite. So fiber that just doesn't improve digestion, it directly influences appetite regulation and metabolic health. Just so to give you the whole picture, dietary fiber is fermented by the gut bacteria into short-chain fatty acids like butyrate and acetate. These short-chain fatty acids stimulate the intestinal cells to release GLP-1 and other hormones. The GLP-1 plays a major role in appetite regulation, glucose control, and metabolism. So when we increase the fiber, we're not just changing a diet, we are activating a metabolic signaling pathway which regulates the appetite. So let's compare two different diets, the Mediterranean diet and the Western diet. Mediterranean diet is high in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, which have a lot of fiber, and hence they promote a healthy microbiome, high microbial diversity, with increased short-chain fatty acids and reduced inflammation. However, Western diet is high in processed food and results in reduced microbial diversity and promotes dysbiosis. So all these foods which are rich in fiber are called prebiotic food because they provide for fermentable substrate that promotes the beneficial bacteria to grow. These include onions, garlic, green banana, oats, whole grains, seaweed, and many more. On the other hand, there are probiotic foods that are fermented foods that contain live beneficial bacteria which add to the gut flora as microbes or by producing bioactive metabolites. And these include buttermilk, yogurt, miso, kefir, kimchi, natto, kombucha, tempeh. In fact, every region in the world has its own diverse fermented foods. These are some of the common fermented foods from India, like dhokla, handvo, idli, dosa, ambli, and kanji. And then fermented rice, it's known by different names in India, appam, and then some of the northeastern fermented foods like gundruk, soybum, and exon. What if someone does not eat fiber and their diet has a lot of ultra-processed food? What happens in that situation? The ultra-processed food is a double whammy because one, it doesn't have the fiber, but independent of that, it also reduces microbial diversity. It reduces short-chain fatty acids and increases inflammation and results in the impaired gut barrier, which promotes the leaky gut. There was actually a study which showed that as the number of servings of processed food increases, the all-cause mortality goes up. And in fact, when the servings go up to more than 4 times a day, this was independently associated with a 62% relatively increased hazard for all-cause mortality. So the take-home points I have for you is that excess weight and metabolic dysfunction is linked to both diet and microbiome, in addition to other factors. Factors to promote healthy microbiome include eating 30 plus varieties of plants per week, lots of fiber, 25 to 35 grams per day, fermented foods, Mediterranean style eating, reduce ultra-processed food, and added sugar. The number may seem a lot, but when you include the vegetables, fruits, herbs, spices, the 30 plus variety is easily achievable. So I think the real question we should ask is not what we should eat, it is about what we should feed our microbiome, because every meal we eat feeds trillions of microbes that determine how the energy is harvested and processed. Thank you.